who are watching. It's probably 10:30 over there. So anyway, so this is I thought an interesting topic. I had actually given the same talk to my colleagues back when I went to India, and a couple of my medical colleagues here. I kind of removed some of the little too sciencey stuff and try to make it a little bit more for people who have not gone to med school. But again, the idea, as we mentioned, is how to slow aging. Can you all see the slides? I hope you can. Okay. Anyway, so next slide is about the WHO. The guidelines have changed, and thankfully they have updated the guideline about what does it mean to be old. And as you can see, the new definition of old age is anyone up to 65 is not considered old anymore, which is kind of interesting. It looks like the WHO had probably a lot of people who were wanted to be younger a little longer. But jokes apart, and the new definition of aging actually has been, quite different from what used to be considered old. So as we can see in our own life too, in the olden days, by the time someone is 50 or 60, they're considered kind of real old, but not anymore, thankfully. Next slide, please. As kind of a cartoon, just to show what it means to be old uh, in my definition, which is you're getting old when the candles cost more than the cake. So let's see here. Next slide, please. Okay, so now this is to show what happened over the last 2-3 centuries. You can see the life expectancy has really gone up, which is a great thing. Yeah, as you can see here, across the world, across the continents, the life expectancy have gone up, which is great. But next slide, please. This, however, is a more sobering graph, right? So you can see the life expectancy before like 19th, 18th century were like 20, 30, 40 years. Actually, Indian life expectancy at the beginning of 20th century was considered about just barely 40 years, which is incredible considering now. But what has now it is about 70 or so, but what has really changed the life expectancy is the improvement in infant mortality. You can see the life expectancy of the children is what has really increased the average. As any of you know, when you increase the life expectancy of a baby, the average goes up markedly more than if you increase the life expectancy of a 70-year-old, because the average, so a 1-year-old living has a way more influence on the total average life expectancy. But when you look at this graph carefully, if you look at the survival improvement of someone, say 70-year-old, it is a little bit more sobering. You can see the graph has not been as dramatic as one would expect. So 70-year-old in 19th century beginning who have already reached 70-year-old, they, of course, they had a high mortality than now, but it is now we haven't gotten so much better. What it basically shows is that when you look at the average life expectancy improved to have like more than doubled in 100 years, just doesn't necessarily tell the whole story. We are still old age, and disease of old age is still a big problem, and we haven't really not gotten much better at it. Next slide, please. Okay, now this is important. I have some friends from back when I went to med school. I'm no, sorry, my pre-degree days, and they're all same age as me. So this is the average life expectancy of someone who is, say, 50-year-old, and you can see the 50-year-old has a pretty much 90 plus chance of getting up to age 60, and about 25 to 30% up to 90. As you can see the graph here, the expectancy of women is definitely better than a man, And that's across biology. No, in biology, one thing is men is the weaker sex in any aspect. Next slide, please. Okay, this is a diagram that shows, and this is important to consider. Now, curing one disease, in med school and in general medicine, focus primarily on organs and disease system. Aging has now been considered as a disease, partly because it is, part of normal growing, and it affects everybody. However, believe it or not, WHO has now declared aging itself as a disease. And the importance is, so far we have been focusing on the symptoms of aging, whether it is, heart disease, cancer, or whatnot, rather than focusing the underlying real pathology, which is aging itself. Next slide, please. So this is just to show the impact of, if we can do something about aging itself. So this is the average of average woman, and this is US numbers. So an average woman is supposed to, 50-year-old woman is supposed to live up to 81, which is probably true in India too. But if we happen to say, if we cure all cancers, that can go up to maybe 85. We only increase that life expectancy by 4 or 5 years. We cure heart disease, we'll increase the expectancy to say 87, 88. If we cure all cancers and all heart disease today, the average life expectancy of a 50-year-old will go up to say 91 years, which is impressive but not dramatic. However, if we can actually slow aging, the expected life expectancy could actually can reach an incredible 120 years or so. So slowing aging has significant long-term benefit. Next slide, please. Now, this is the financial impacts of taking care of older people. As you can see here on the slide, the cost of age-related illnesses is, runs into billions and trillions. These are very high cost, high diseases: heart disease, cancers, dementia, arthritis, frailty, falls. All of these problems of aging can cause significant morbidity and mortality. Next slide, please. Now, this is a diagram showing the difference between biological age and chronological age. Chronological age means, how old you are. I mean, that is, the same for anyone who is, say, 20-year-old or 50-year-old. It's just your birthday. However, what we are realizing now is the biological age could be significantly different. Now, there is a normal age, that is the white. The green has biological age that can be decreased, and you can also have accelerated aging. Next one, please. Now, when we think of anti-aging, the people think of cosmetics usually, and this cartoon is pretty impressive because the boy says, that stuff really works, because he's thinking, this woman is putting on a cream to increase wrinkle. So all these creams and surgeries and botulinum injection, plastic surgery, aging is a multi-billion or maybe trillion-dollar industry throughout the world, as a lot of people are getting older and becoming kind of self-conscious. People are spending a huge amount of money on aging, but most of what is passed off as anti-aging is basically very superficial and cosmetic. Doesn't really change the biology. Next slide, please. Okay, now you can see here a different type of aging possibilities. You can have normal lifespan, you can have an increased lifespan with less morbidity, and you can, at the bottom is where you are, hopefully we will be in maybe another decade or 2 or 3 decades, where you can reverse aging. We have done that in animals, but we don't have that option in humans. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Okay, now, so this is, okay, now some of you might recognize this picture. This is the oldest, I'm sorry, there must be another slide before that, maybe not. Oh yeah, that one, okay. Now, that is the oldest recorded woman. This is a French woman. She lived up to almost 123 years. Okay, so this is just showing the fact that, you know, the life itself can be longer than we expect. Next slide, please. Now, that's another long-lived, one of the long-lived species of turtle. It's actually Jonathan the turtle. Jonathan has his own Wikipedia. He is in, I think, Saint Helens or one of the islands. He is about 190 years old and still going strong. Next slide, please. Okay, now this is the longest living thing on Earth, and this tree is in California. Is almost 5,000 years old. Now I'm showing you all this primarily to show that you could potentially. Can you all? Let me use my computer so I can actually see my slides better. So this tree is almost as old as Moses. Can you all hear me? I hope you can.
Yes, yes.
Okay. All right. So now this one takes the cake in terms of longevity. This is actually a sea sponge at the bottom of the Pacific Ocean, and this sea sponge is 11,000 years old and a living creature, continuously living. Now, the previous tree, if you think about it, that tree was alive before Jesus, before the pyramids, you know, so that was 5,000-year old tree, and this is still there, you know, still alive, still having leaves. This is protected, and the location is actually confidential, and only a few people know the actual location of this. But so you don't want a crazy people going there and, you know, cutting down that amazing tree. Okay, so this sea sponge has lived 11,000 years. So what I'm trying to say here is life can be prolonged, you know, and it has already been done by evolution. Next slide, please. Okay, now this is just a broad outline about anti-aging therapies that, you know, are in the pipeline. We don't have any actual approved anti-aging pipeline drugs at this point, but this is a short list of candidates that are being tried. We do not have time to go through each of them. Again, I'm so sorry we had trouble with the starting of the thing. Next slide, please. Okay, now one of the things that I'm going to focus today is about diet and aging. Now, this cartoon actually says it all. Okay, you can either be, grow healthy and live long time, or you can eat a lot. It's as simple as that. There is significant data. It's fairly across the board consensus that increased calorie intake decrease your survival. Next slide, please. So this is, to show a kind of a cartoon of a young cell and an old cell. There is significant changes within the cell. So aging is not something that is happening, outside. It is actually something that's happening within your cell. So putting a cream or, or dyeing your hair is not going to fix it, or even plastic surgery is not going to fix it. You know, what does fix it is if we can change what is happening at cellular level. Next one, please. Okay, now this is where, one of the things that is very easy to do is caloric restriction and increased physical activity. And this is shown in multiple animal models to increase healthy and long life. Okay, and there is all the underlying mechanism, How that happens, I can go through it in detail, but it may be a little bit boring. But basically, when you have caloric restriction, your mitochondrial health, your stem cell function, your decrease inflammation, and also activate some of the pathways, including something called mTOR, or mammalian target of rapamycin, which is very important in aging. Next one, please. I thought I'll put this interesting picture out here just to kind of show. We all know mitochondria is our battery within the cell, and a lot of aging actually happens when we have mitochondrial dysfunction, or energy dysfunction. And it's interesting that even a battery, I mean, I'm talking about a cell, cell battery lives or lasts longer when you don't overcharge it continuously. I did not know it, but I just came to know about this. So it's very similar what's happening, in biology and in your cell phone. You want to have your cell phone sometime, if you want the battery to last long, or you don't want to be fully charged at all the time. You need to have times when it is a little bit less charged. So it is very similar, biology too. Next one, please. Now, this is some of the experimental models of a prolongation of life. Now, this has been tried in worms, flies, killfish, mice, rats. So these are animals where calorie restriction has shown to increase the lifespan. Next one. Again, this is a pathway. This may be a little uh, more too detailed for people listening, but just to show, when you have caloric restriction, it can cause marked changes in the epigenetics. I will talk about epigenetics in a minute, and also increases in the cellular so-called autophagy. That means killing of cells that are in the kind of damaged cells, which is also important in prolonging longevity. Next slide, please. Okay, now this is the animal models I was talking about. So it has been tried in yeast. It has been tried in the C. elegans. This is a C. elegans is a worm that is one of the most remarkable worms in all of biology. There has been at least 6 or 7 Nobel Prizes given on the study of this particular single worm. But again, so that, you can see caloric restriction in the worms have increased lifespan. Mice, again, it is increased lifespan. And humans, it has shown to have physiological changes. It is a little hard to do controlled trial of caloric restriction in humans, as you can imagine. But in general, if it works in different species, we are also very closely related to other species, so it should work in humans too. Next one. So at what age do you want to start caloric restriction? Earlier the better. So if you do caloric restriction from youth, so this is again animal models. You can see, this is control mouse, so that you can see the caloric restriction starting at youth have marked increase compared to those who have started later in life. So this is never too late to start caloric restriction. The earlier the better. Next one, please. Now, this is just to show, this is something useful for people to understand what it means by intermittent fasting. This is really not a fad. I mean, there are so many fads in that, this diet. But intermittent fasting really appears to help. Basically, you have to have periods of fasting every day. Fasting means not having calories. You can definitely drink water. You can have black coffee. You can have tea without sugar and milk, but no calories. So the idea is every part of your body needs a rest. Like that's why we take a sleep. Our brain needs about 6 to 8 hours of sleep. Our GI tract needs rest for maybe 12 to 16 hours. And when you do intermittent fasting, and which is very easy to do, the easiest way to do intermittent fasting is to skip breakfast. This idea that breakfast is the most important meal of the day is one of the most dangerous kind of false sense out there. You can easily skip breakfast, because that's most people eat breakfast because that's what they do, or they have been told to do. Most of the time people eat by clock, not because they're hungry, just because it's lunchtime. And once you start doing it, you realize it's so easy to do. If you skip a meal, you can, keep doing that. Most of the time, your hunger actually goes down. Another important thing to remember is food is the biggest stimulant for more food. Like for example, if you eat a donut at like 8 o'clock, you will be super hungry at 10 o'clock because the insulin release make you feel hungry. So hunger itself is not a good sign that you need more calories. This is a common mistake. Another common mistake in terms of food, even though I have shown a lot of fruits here, fruits are healthy, but some people overdo fruits, especially fruits like grapes, very dangerous things in high quantity, very rich in sugar. And a healthy diet doesn't mean a lot of fruits. And that's a very common mistake people do. You have to be very careful about fruits, very high calorie, very high pure sugar. Next slide, please. Okay, I think this we could skip again. This is kind of getting into the details of molecular models of life extension. You can see all these molecules here. Imagine the number of targets we have. So this is an area of intense research. These pathways are being looked at and how to modify them. So there is a lot of pharmacological drugs that are being developed. Next one, please. Again, this is another drug that commonly prescribed drug in diabetes called metformin. Metformin can cause kind of a effect of intermittent fasting. But again, I am not giving medical advice here. Metformin is a drug. It has some serious side effects. So you have to discuss with your own doctor before you start taking metformin. But this is a drug that appears to mimic the effect of fasting. So if you take metformin, it is a drug that's been around for decades for diabetic patients. But if you take metformin, even healthy people, when they take it, can mimic the effect of intermittent fasting and activate some of the downstream pathways that can increase longevity. Next one, please. I think we can skip that. Again, this is some of the drugs and substances that's tried in different groups. Resveratrol, which is present in red wine, but at small quantities. It appears to reduce risk in various species. Rapamycin is a target of, is an inhibitor of something called mTOR, which is a very critical pathway in the cellular biochemistry. It's called mammalian target of rapamycin. The mTOR appears to be a very potent drug to increase longevity. However, rapamycin is a very toxic drug. You cannot use rapamycin to increase longevity. And then there is, of course, metformin. Next one, please. So this is animal models of aging in metformin in C. elegans. You can see the cells that has been treated with metformin appears to maintain the shape longer. Next one. Now, this is just a cartoon. So, so we are nowhere near age reversal, but again, next one, please. Okay, now this is an important aspect. Some of you who have biology background would probably know what I'm talking about. We used to think aging is loss of information within the genes. The gene itself get mutated. However, the bigger issue is not the genes, but so-called epigenetic clock. Now, what is epigenetics? In briefly, we have a sperm and an ovum become an embryo. That is one cell, right? It has the same genetic information. That same cell turns into the hair cells, the kidney cell, the brain cell. Now, that differentiation of one same gene information to different cell types is modulated through something called epigenetics. And that is basically controlling the gene. So the gene is not your destiny. We used to think genes are everything, but the genes are kind of like a keyboard on a piano. The one who is playing the piano is the so-called epigenetic. So the epigenetic changes can happen very quickly. Gene changes take decades, whereas epigenetic changes can happen within the same generation. So you can have two twins, same exact genes with different environmental factors will have different manifestation because of the epigenetic factors. The good thing about this fact is
Epigenetic changes are reversible, unlike genetic changes, which are not reversible. So, so aging is primarily a problem with epigenetic changes. So some of those things can be reversed. Next one, please. Again, so this is the diagram showing the same thing. So you have the chromosome, the mRNA, and all these things are important. Actually, you probably heard of mRNA in the vaccine area, but again, mRNA is also are important in epigenetic changes. So what happens is the gene, this blocks are the nucleotides. The nucleotides remain the same, but you can have so-called methyl group added to this, which can actually cause genetic changes down the line. Now, as we get older, so we lose epigenetic information. So, for example, the same cell can, in a baby give rise to, or in a fetus, give rise to the skin cell and the brain cell. As we get older, the brain cell may lose that epigenetic information and can get de-differentiated. Think of a brain cell, doesn't have the information to process to be a brain cell anymore. It can, so that kind of epigenetic changes are reversible. Next one, please. So again, what affects the epigenetics? This is again a lot of things can affect your epigenetics. Now, like I said, genetic changes are also common, but usually happens when you are exposed to a mutagenic agent or X-rays. Whereas epigenetic changes can happen from bad diet, even your stress levels, social interactions. There is a study from Harvard that showed people who maintain close social interactions have less aging. Some alternative medicine, as a doctor of modern medicine, I hate to say this, but we do things poorly in some aspects. So there are things that you can, there might be things in alternative medicine that might prolong, or help with this. Not everything, don't quote me on this and say, some quacks in Kerala and all, but there are things in alternative medicine that might be helpful. There are drugs that are being looked at. The microbiome, this is a huge area. That's the normal gut bacteria and normal bacteria that resides in our body. We know that we have about 100 bacteria for every human cell. So we are more bacteria than humans in that aspect. Exercise, of course, major factor. Stress and financial factors, drug abuse, toxic, all these things can affect your epigenetic signaling. So your aging can be affected significantly from all of these things. Next one, please. Again, this is a little too sciencey, but again, probably we'll skip it. But again, there is a thing called telomeres. These are the things at the end of your chromosome that get shorter and shorter with every cell division. So each cell has a lifespan. Now we are looking at how to modulate that so that cellular life itself can be prolonged. This is again an interesting area of research. Next one. Okay, now this is another important term. Are we on time? I think we need to stop. Maybe another. I have another 3 or 4 slides, but we'll have some time for questions. Anyway, the term is called hormesis. I recommend all of you read upon this on Google because we don't have time to go through this. The idea of hormesis is basically that like stress at a certain level is actually good for the body. So the benefit of say exercise is primarily through hormesis. Hormesis, another way to say hormesis is there is a saying that what doesn't kill you makes you stronger, and that is actually hormesis. Things that are mild, a little bit injurious to you. Majority of the benefit from the exercise, especially strength training and all, comes because it causes small muscle injury. And that injury is actually beneficial because when you get injured, that healing process actually kills off some of the senescent or older cells. So this hormesis is one of the major way exercise helps in delaying aging. Hormesis is also another way some of the medications help, or some of the food components, say resveratrol. So the hormesis is basically also there is something called xenohormesis. That means if you eat a plant that had been under some stress, that plant will make products that will be good for you. It's called xenohormesis. Now, one of the problems with this kind of mass farming, especially in US and UK, I have friends, I mean, listening in US and UK here, US and Canada, our food is grown in such efficiency, they don't have any stress. So that means your plants that you're eating goes through zero stress. That is actually bad, in the sense they don't develop the protective thing, because in natural environment, the plants have to develop protective things against, parasites, against insects. Throw all this insecticides and everything, and, your plant will make huge amount of like grapes or apples and whatnot. But I do think that will decrease the so-called xenohormesis. So, it's probably not a bad idea to have food that are grown more naturally. Will be more healthy for you because of that. The hormesis can be transferred from one species to another. Next one, please. Okay, this is a talk on by itself. This is just to show you some of the advantages of being active and health, in health. Is Being active causes, significant changes at cellular level. So if there is one thing, I mean, this is, I think, pretty obvious, but being active is extremely important to delay aging. It can cause significant changes at every level. Next one, please. Okay. Now, where are we going at this with all this information? So this is where, thankfully, because of all the improvement in artificial intelligence and machine learning, we are looking at now close to 1 billion molecules are being looked at as anti-aging therapies. One of the good advantage of nowadays is you can have the model of the target on a computer, and you can develop the drug, much more precise based on the target. And you can, go through a lot of things. This used to take decades are now done within, a few months, even years. And the COVID vaccine is an example, like how fast things are moving. A vaccine used to take 4 to 10 years. So this is amazing because we are using technology in other fields like AI and those areas. So we should be having drugs. I mean, but in general, humans are, kind of lazy. Everyone want to take a pill, but the simpler thing are already available, as I mentioned: caloric restriction and exercise, and sleeping, lack of stress, those kind of things. Next one, please. Anyway, that's how we can change aging through medicine. Next one, please. Okay, so now this is some of the age reversal projects that are actively looking at. Cellular DNA damage can be replaced by so-called NAD infusions. NAD is one of the main component of cellular battery. Uh, Systemic regeneration, stem cell mobilized young plasma infusion, thymic regeneration. So many things are being looked at right now, and this is no longer considered like a natural thing that that we have to take it lying down. Anyone who says anti-aging therapies are unnatural in this group, what we are doing right now is unnatural. I am sitting in a place in US, and you are probably somewhere in India. So a lot of things we are doing are not natural anymore. So aging is also one of those things where we could potentially turn against, because what nature has given us, what as human have done is we use our technology to improve upon nature. Next one, please. I have just 2 more slides. Next one. No, I'm sorry. There's one before that. All right. So, okay, this is not, I'm not going into this, but this is an interesting area where people are thinking, can we upload ourselves, to the cloud and become immortal? Hopefully, maybe in the next 2-3 centuries, but we are nowhere near close to that. And that's the end of my talk. Thank you all so much. And again, I appreciate you guys listening, and apologies for the delay in starting. I'll open to questions.
Thank you, Doctor. കുറേ കാര്യങ്ങൾ ഞാൻ മനസ്സിലാക്കി. ഞാൻ വിചാരിച്ചിരുന്ന കുറേ misconceptions ഉണ്ടായിരുന്നു. So I got that information. Thank you so much for the talk. The slide is really informative. So we are open for questions. ആർക്കെങ്കിലും ചോദ്യങ്ങൾ ഉണ്ടെങ്കിൽ unmute ചെയ്യുക.
Like chat ഇടാം.
Okay, whichever it is.
Yeah, whichever. Yeah, unmute ചെയ്താലും it'll be nice.
Can I call for an overall applause for this wonderful lecture before we can continue with anything?
Thank you, Jacob.
Thank you.
Doctor, one question regarding hermosis. അത് ഒരു ഇൻട്രസ്റ്റിംഗ് സബ്ജക്റ്റ് ആയിരുന്നു. ഗൂഗിളിൽ ഞങ്ങൾ തേടിക്കോളാം. അതിനകത്തൊരു ക്വസ്റ്റ്യൻ ഉണ്ടായിരുന്നു എനിക്ക്. ഈ ഫിഷ് ഒക്കെ ഹയർ അക്വാട്ടിക് സ്റ്റാൻഡേർഡ്സിലൊക്കെ റെയർ ചെയ്യുന്ന ഫിഷസ് ഫുഡ് ഓർഗാനിക് അങ്ങനെയൊക്കെ നമ്മൾ വാങ്ങിക്കാറുണ്ട് സ്റ്റോറിൽ നിന്ന്. ഇപ്പൊ സാറ് പറഞ്ഞ സെൻസിൽ വെച്ച് നോക്കുകയാണെന്നുണ്ടെങ്കിൽ അങ്ങനെ ഒന്നും റെയർ ചെയ്യാത്തതാണ് നല്ലത് എന്നാണ് തോന്നുന്നത്. അതിനെ കുറിച്ച് ഒന്ന് കമന്റ് ചെയ്യാമോ?
Yeah, so like I said, it's the same thing. Even obesity get transferred from cattle to humans. Pandaka cattle they had to walk and get the grass, right? Ipa food angottu kondu kodukana avarku. I mean, sometimes I have seen some video where the cats are, the cattle, cow and all are just sitting there watching TV and stuff. I mean, literally, they have become like us. So those bad habits can get trended upwards in the species. So you don't want things that are grown in very low stress environment. Stress is actually good, a little bit of stress, because hormesis does get transferred. And we do know that from plant studies, plants that are grown in the nature, because what we consider good in a plant, like for example, resveratrol, right? The plants or caffeine, plants make these things as an anti-parasitic thing. Plants are doing this against the parasites, and so those at low quantities or small quantities actually become good for us, and that's the hormesis aspect. Yeah, you're right.
Okay, James said, I think it is James said, you have a question. Doctor, how many meals you take a day?
See, the thing is, I wish I did everything what I have told, but it's not easy. But I have stopped having breakfast at least for the past 2-3 years. So it's easy to skip, very easy to skip. You can have a black coffee or something, and one meal for an adult, especially if you're eating a meal, US American or Canadian meal, one meal is a lot. If you look at the calories, ideally you want to strive to have about 70% of your calorie requirement. You need to feel hunger at least once a day, ideally, and that's when you know that you're doing something right. In fact, if you really want to do it, you want to do well for the 2-3 day, there is something called chaperone mediated autophagy, and that's an amazing thing where you can have this kind of senescent cells, cells that are not healthy, get autophaged, means killed by many cells. The problem with the senescent cells, that means cells that are older, is that the oldness infect other cells. So if you have, say, one cell that gone wrong, it actually infects, or literally infects cells that are close by. People, you have probably realized that, if you have one gray hair, the gray hair around also become, and the hair around become gray immediately too. So senescence is one of those things that can actually infect, so to speak. And CMP or chaperone mediated autophagy and all, you can, if you can skip at least one meal a day. I mean, see, the thing is, the simplest and the most common reason for most of the morbidity these days, not just about aging, about cancer, heart disease, cholesterol, arthritis, is overeating. And overeating is actually, so to speak, considered normal eating. Like most adults who are sedentary don't need 3 meals a day.
Okay, എനിക്കൊരു question ഉണ്ട്. ഇപ്പൊ ഡോക്ടർ പറഞ്ഞു ബ്രേക്ക്ഫാസ്റ്റ് സ്കിപ്പ് ചെയ്ത് we can make maybe drink a coffee and then continue with the day and go for the lunch. So presentation ഇടയിൽ ഡോക്ടർ പറഞ്ഞായിരുന്ന ഒരു പോയിന്റ് ഉണ്ട്. So if we start eating, like ഒരു ഡോണട്ട് കഴിച്ചു കഴിഞ്ഞാൽ after like at 8 o'clock, then at 10 o'clock I may feel hungry കാരണം ഞാൻ ആ ഡോണട്ട് സ്റ്റാർട്ട് ചെയ്തതുകൊണ്ടാണ്. So if I drink a coffee, would that also have the same impact?
No, that's a great question. So the way it works is, if you have a high calorie, especially calories that are easily absorbed, like donut is classic example. So donut മാത്രമല്ല, നമ്മുടെ നാട്ടിലത്തെ ഫുഡില്ലേ, that's high in easy to absorb food. അതൊക്കെ കഴിച്ചാൽ, so we will have a sudden surge in glucose. And the sudden surge in glucose will make your body to have a sudden release in insulin. The problem is the insulin lasts longer in the blood than the glucose does. So 2 hours later, your glucose is gone, but your insulin is still high. It makes you hungry. So most people think, okay, your body is telling you to eat, and so you should eat. But the fact is, your eating is what triggered the hunger. Coffee, especially if you are not adding sugar or milk, it doesn't have any calories. So that will not cause that.
Yeah, thank you.
I have a question. That's based on the comment. അതായത് ഡോക്ടർ പറഞ്ഞു ഒരു ചെറിയ ഇഞ്ചുറി നമുക്ക് വളരെ നല്ലതാണ്, പക്ഷെ അത് ഇൻഫ്ലമേഷൻ ക്രിയേറ്റ് ചെയ്യത്തില്ല. Is inflammation good for you?
No, not at all. Not at all. I wish I can go back to the slide. Yeah, no, the hormesis, if you look at that, if you remember that graph, it is a subtle thing. There is a stress, like, people who runs excessively. I have to say this.
Yeah.
People who run excessively, they have a higher mortality. So, even exercise can be overdone. So there's a fine balance, because you don't want to overdo anything, not even exercise, because there is data that people who overexert can have high mortality. It is the same thing with fasting also. You don't want to overdo fasting. People who has BMI less than 17, that is, pathologically thin, they have a higher mortality, as high as people who are morbidly obese. So everything in moderation, even moderation in moderation, So yes, you are absolutely right. Even injury that is, can be cause inflammation if you overdo it. So the hormesis is a fine balance. Like I said, it's the same thing that can be dangerous at a higher level. And the micro injury is not injury. Okay, so now if you exercise and if you injure like a ligament, that is not the injury I'm talking. Okay, this injury is the micro injury of the muscle fiber. You shouldn't be feeling it. This is within the cellular level. So when you have micro injury of the muscle fibers, they get replaced and they get healed, and the healing process heals the remaining cells also around that area.
Hello, doctor. See, this is one of the books.
Yes.
I am from Saudi Arabia.
Yes.
So this is the book. I read a lot of things. I think 25 language. 25 ലാംഗ്വേജിലടക്കം ആ ബുക്ക് ഇപ്പൊ ഡോക്ടർ പറഞ്ഞ മാതിരി കംപ്ലീറ്റ്ലി whatever you speak, താങ്കൾ പറഞ്ഞ കംപ്ലീറ്റ് അത് ഡീറ്റെയിൽസ് അതിൽ കൊടുത്തിരിക്കുന്നു. മെയിൻ ഇമ്പോർട്ടന്റ് ആയിട്ട് സാർ പറഞ്ഞതുപോലെ 3 മെയിൽസ് പോലും അത് വെരി ഡിഫിക്കൽട്ട് ആയിട്ട് ഒരു ദിവസം ഒരു 1% വെരി ഡിഫിക്കൽട്ട് ആയിട്ട് വരുന്നു ഇന്നത്തെ സാഹചര്യത്തിൽ എന്ന് പറയുന്നു. പക്ഷെ നമ്മുടെ നാട്ടിലാവുമ്പം അത് ഫുഡ് വളരെയധികം വ്യത്യാസത്തിലുള്ള ഫുഡുകളാണ് നമ്മൾ കഴിച്ചുകൊണ്ടിരിക്കുന്നത്. ഡയറ്റ് ഫുഡ് ഇപ്പൊ കുറച്ച് വ്യത്യാസങ്ങളുണ്ട് നമ്മുടെ നാട്ടിലെ ഫുഡ്. പക്ഷെ യൂറോപ്യൻ മറ്റ് സ്ഥലങ്ങളിലുള്ള ശരിക്കും ജങ്ക് ഫുഡും ഫാറ്റ് ഫുഡും ആണ് ഇതിന് മെയിൻ ഇമ്പോർട്ടന്റ് ആയിട്ട് പറയുന്നത്, അല്ലേ? അപ്പം
Right.
ഈ നമ്മൾ മാക്സിമം ഐ തിങ്ക് ഇപ്പം നമ്മൾക്ക് അസുഖങ്ങൾ കൂടുതൽ വരാൻ മെയിൻ കാരണം എക്സസൈസ് കുറവ് നമ്മളെ ഭക്ഷണത്തിൽ നിന്നാണ് എന്നുള്ളതാണ്. ഐ തിങ്ക് ദിസ് ഈസ് ദ ബുക്ക് ആൻഡ് യു ആർ right.
So yes, very true. This is very consensus ആണ്. ഇപ്പൊ ഞാൻ പറഞ്ഞതിൽ കോൺട്രവേഴ്സി ആയിട്ടുള്ള ഒരു കാര്യമില്ല. Because ഒരു lay publicന്റെ അടുത്ത് പറയുമ്പോൾ we don't want to talk about things that are in experimental or highly controversial. So this is widely accepted, so the caloric restriction and exercise is widely accepted. ഒരു കാര്യം one I wanted to highlight is a common mistake. ഈ fruit നല്ല എന്ന് പറഞ്ഞ മാറ്റം ഒരു കോമൺ മിസ്റ്റേക്ക് ആണ് അത്. I have seen patients come back and they say they are eating healthy and they've gained weight, and you ask them like what happened, they'll say I'm only eating fruits, and they don't realize fruits can be a really dangerous food, especially fruits like grapes. You can eat like like a lot of it, and so yeah. The other important thing is people think they can eat if they exercise a lot, and that is another very common misconception. They think they say on the treadmill for like half an hour there or maybe an hour, and they are sweating a lot, and they think, oh, okay, I can now go and have a steak or a big meal or a biryani, and that is a misconception.
Yeah.
The problem is our body is extremely efficient at burning calories, so you can think you probably burned say 700 calories because you are all sweating. In reality you probably burned only 200 calories, and to reward yourself you end up eating something that is 1000 calories. So after exercise you end up actually that happens all the time. A lot of people reward themselves for exercise by eating, and they almost always overestimate the calories they burn.
Okay. The one of things, hello.
Yeah, I can hear.
So one of the things they are saying, where the coming from our, I mean, നമ്മളുടെ പാരമ്പര്യമായിട്ട് നമ്മൾ അച്ഛന് അമ്മയിൽ നിന്നും കിട്ടുന്ന അതുകൂടി നമ്മളെ ഈ ഹെൽത്തിലേക്ക് ഇമ്പ്രൂവ് ആവുന്നുണ്ട് എന്നുള്ളൊരു നമ്മൾ പാരമ്പര്യമായിട്ട് കിട്ടുന്ന ഒരു ഹെൽത്ത്. അപ്പം നമ്മൾക്ക് കൂടി അത് നമ്മൾ കറക്റ്റായിട്ട് ആ എക്സസൈസ് അല്ലെങ്കിൽ അതിൻ്റെ ഫുഡ് പോർഷൻസ് അത് ഫോളോ ചെയ്തില്ലെങ്കിൽ ആ പാരമ്പര്യമായിട്ടുള്ള അസുഖങ്ങൾ കൂടി നമ്മൾക്ക് ഇത് മെയിൻ ഡാമേജ് ആയിട്ട് വരുന്നത് നമ്മളെ ബ്രെയിൻ ഹെഡ് ഇഞ്ചുറി എന്നും കൂടി ആ ബുക്കിൽ കാണുന്നത്. ഡോക്ടറെ അഭിപ്രായം അറിഞ്ഞാൽ കൊള്ളാം.
Very, very true. So one of the things, if you want to live long, is a joke actually. If you want to live long, choose your parents well. Okay, if you have parents who live long, a lot of genetic factors do affect aging. However, you can't choose your parents, right? So you can't. So however, what I've discussed in epigenetics is, it used to be the older concept that the genes are everything. You are given like a gene book and you have to play by that book. That is not true. The epigenetic information, that how the genes are going to get expressed, is very different depending on your environmental factors. So we have studies among twins. The so-called monozygotic twins have the same exact copy of the same gene, but they say there are some monozygotic twins, they grew apart and lived in two different circumstances. They have significantly different phenotype. Phenotype is what we, in biology, what we call as phenotype is what you are. Genotype is the underlying gene. The phenotype is what the gene expresses. Now, the phenotype can be varied depending on your environmental exposure. So genes, whether good or bad, just because you're born to Einstein, doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be as good as Einstein, for example. So the same thing, you have good genes, bad genes, doesn't necessarily is not the end of the story. Moreover, there's no point in getting fixated on something you can't change. Your genes, you are what you are, but that the genes and the heredity is important though.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Good.
ഈ ഒരു ചോദ്യം ചോദിച്ചോട്ടെ. Americans eat lot of salads. How good is eating salad? Do we have any enzymes to digest raw food?
Yeah, no. There's two questions. Salad, definitely, there's a lot of salad that you can digest. The only problem, what I have seen in, at least in the South here, one thing about the South I have found is they get some very healthy food and turn that into unhealthy. They take these tomatoes and fry them. It's crazy. But again, if you eat salad without adding a lot of dressings that are high calorie, it is very healthy. The advantage of salad, if you're eating things that even if you don't absorb it will actually decrease your hunger, and that's itself is a good thing. Salad is definitely a good thing, and it is fairly low calories. Yeah, as far as I know, there is really no downside to eating salads. There is downside to eating fruits. There is downside to eating salad when you add a lot of creamy what do you call dressing on it.
There was one more question in there. Do we have any enzymes to digest raw food?
No, we do not have. There are things that well, raw food means like salad. Of course, we can. It's not raw food. The things like salad you can absorb. You don't need to cook it. In fact, humans can eat uncooked meat, uncooked fish. We don't need to cook food to absorb it. Cooking make the absorption and the chewing and all better, and of course easier to eat. But now, no food, you don't need to eat, like even fish you can eat raw, like sushi. Cooking just makes the absorption a little bit more faster. But salad is probably best eaten without cooking.
Ashraf, എനിക്ക് തോന്നുന്നു ഒരു സെല്ലുലോസിനെ ആയിരിക്കും ഉദ്ദേശിച്ചത്.
Oh, cellulose. Okay, Shyam. Thanks. I was not sure you were there, Shyam. Yeah. So if you are talking about cellulose, yeah, we don't absorb it, and that's a good thing, because unabsorbed food like cellulose become part of a residue in the diet, and that's a very good for your colon GI health. So to have unabsorbed stuff back in the food is actually a good thing. No downside.
Doctor, why is it like it almost seems like we are evolutionarily predisposed to liking things that are not good for us, like sweet or items or biryani? Right? Why does it do that?
Yeah, no, that's a great question, and that explains a lot of what's happening to us. We are products of evolution. So traditionally food was a rare commodity, especially food that is sweet. Like if you find a fruit or whatnot, you won't know when you're going to get your next fruit. Now, our genes, our behaviors are evolved over thousands upon thousands of generations. Now we are combining that scarcity throughout human history. Scarcity and lack of food was what drove us. Now we have that same scarcity mentality and so much food. So that combination is why it is so hard for it's so hard for us to not to eat, because this is another reason when a lot of people think if your body says it, if you want to think like you should be doing it, may not be the right thing, because your body is a product of thousands upon thousands of generations, and it takes many more generations for us to get used to a situation where we are surrounded by food. There is so much food everywhere. So great point, and that actually explains a lot of why we tend to gravitate towards unhealthy food.
മഹേഷയുടെ ചോദ്യം ഉണ്ടായിരുന്നല്ലോ.
അതെ, ഞാനും ചോദിക്കട്ടെ. ഞാൻ ഈ പ്രോഗ്രാം അറ്റൻഡ് ചെയ്തതിൽ ഒരു മെയിൻ ഉദ്ദേശം എന്താണെന്ന് വെച്ചാൽ ഒരു ഷോർട്ട് കട്ട് കിട്ടുമോ എന്ന് അറിയാൻ വേണ്ടിയായിരുന്നു. അതായത് ഐ വാണ്ടഡ് ടു ഗോ വാക്കിംഗ്, നോട്ട് ലൈങ്. ദാറ്റ് വാസ് മൈ മെയിൻ എയിം. ബിക്കോസ് നോട്ട് എക്സ്പെക്ടൻസി അല്ലെങ്കിൽ 100 വർഷം ജീവിക്കുക എന്നുള്ളതല്ല, ജീവിക്കുന്നിടത്തോളം വർഷം ക്വാളിറ്റി ആയിട്ട് ജീവിക്കുക. ഈ കിടന്നു പോകുന്ന ഒരു പരിപാടി ഉണ്ടല്ലോ, അതിലേക്ക് പോകാതിരിക്കാനുള്ള വല്ല പൊടിക്കൈ വല്ലതും കിട്ടുമോ, വല്ല സീക്രട്ട് അങ്ങനെ വല്ലതും ഉണ്ടോ എന്നാണ് ഞാൻ ഇതുവരെ വെയിറ്റ് ചെയ്തത്. അപ്പൊ then about this breakfast, there is a confusion. Actually, I was discussing with the doctor and he advised me, you eat any number of calories in the morning, breakfast, because you are doing a fasting at night for 8 to 9 hours. So if you skip that breakfast, it will affect your brain, memory and all those things you are studying. So you eat as much you can, and then reduce in the lunch and bring to minimum in the dinner. Go for a salad or a soup, that will do. അല്ലെങ്കിൽ നമ്മുടെ മലയാളത്തിൽ പറഞ്ഞ കഞ്ഞി കഞ്ഞിയൊക്കെ കുടിച്ചു കഴിഞ്ഞാൽ രാത്രി നല്ല ഉറക്കം വീണ്ടും കിട്ടും. അപ്പോൾ ആഹാരത്തെ പറ്റി അദ്ദേഹം എന്നോട് പറഞ്ഞത് ഇങ്ങനെയാണ്. പക്ഷെ എൻ്റെ മകന് 44 വയസ്സുള്ള ആളാണ്. അവൻ ഹി യൂസ് ടു സ്കിപ്പ് ബ്രേക്ക്ഫാസ്റ്റ്. അവൻ വൈകിട്ടൊക്കെ ഹെവി ആയിട്ട് കഴിച്ചതായിരിക്കും, പാർട്ടിയൊക്കെ കാണും. അപ്പോൾ അവൻ പറയുന്നത് അത് ശരിയായിട്ട് ബോഡിയിൽ രാവിലത്തെ ബ്രേക്ക്ഫാസ്റ്റിന്റെ ആവശ്യമില്ല. അങ്ങനെ ഒരു തിയറി ഞങ്ങളുടെ വീട്ടിലുണ്ട്. So I am confused in between, because now you are telling that breakfast is not necessary, but after a long this gap.
Okay. Now, okay, I got the question. So first and foremost, if your doctor have instructed a specific diet for you, please follow that. Because everyone has different health conditions, and that is most important to follow whatever he told you. Secondly, no. So the other aspect is, what you said is true. What I said is easier to skip breakfast is because you want at least 16 hours of no calories. And one of the easy way to do that would be an early dinner, like about 6 o'clock, and have a brunch about 10 o'clock. So that is about, about 12 plus 4, about 16 hours. So that 6 o'clock dinner, then you can of course drink water, whatnot, and then a lot of that time is passed sleeping, so you're not thinking of food, and then you skip the breakfast and have a brunch. I'm saying this is not the only way, but it is one of the easiest way to do it. So then you have a brunch about 10 o'clock, and that way you can easily get about 16 hours, and then you don't need a lunch, and then you have a maybe a light snack or something, and then have your dinner at 6 o'clock. So your eating window is shortened between 10 to 6. It doesn't matter if you really like breakfast, that is fine too. The important point is to have a fasting window and an eating window, and the eating window should be about 8 to 10 hours, and the rest of the time should be kind of a fasting window. That is ideal.
ഒരു കാര്യം ചോദിക്കാനുള്ള, ജോനാഥൻ തട്ടലിന്റെ കാര്യം പറഞ്ഞു, ഒരു 190 ഇയർ എന്നൊക്കെ, അതെങ്ങനെയായിരിക്കും അത് ഡിസൈഡ് ചെയ്യുന്നത്?
Jonathan, the picture was there when he first moved to St. Helena's, actually. So he had a picture taken of him when he was like, say, 20 years old. And they had the documented picture of that turtle. Actually, the St. Helena has a stamp in honor of Jonathan. And surprisingly, it is the same. No. So they have the same turtles pictures over the years. I'm not really sure how you distinguish between turtles. They all look the same to me. But this is real. I think I don't think it is made up. And there is a turtle from India named Advaita, and that died, I think, a few years ago. And it was claimed to be 255 years old, even though it's less well documented as Jonathan. Yeah, turtles live a long time.
Doctor, there's a documented cases in, I think, the British Zoo, which I think 2 or 3 years back died at the age of 228. That was well documented.
Which one? The turtle?
Turtle. It came from Galapagos Island. I think somebody said that when Darwin came, he
probably was still there. Yeah, that is possible. And turtles are long living anyway. So
maybe because they are not exercising, they are too sudden.
So that is a great. So you can't differentiate. The biology is trumps everything else. That's like saying if you eat vegetarian, you will become fat like elephants, right? So biology trumps everything else. Yeah.
And the running bunny lives lesser, and slow turtle lives longer.
So this is, again, like I said, genetics and those things plays a significant role. And if you think at biology, animals that are less likely to get eaten tend to live longer, and also larger animals tend to live longer. Actually, there is a theory that per cell, per gram, a smaller animal will have to use more calories. A mouse will have to use far more calories per gram than an elephant does. So when you use more calories per gram, you tend to live shorter. And when you use more calories per gram, interestingly, your heart rate goes up. And there is a concept that about 2 billion heart rate is what most mammals get. So you get 2 billion heart rate and you're done, most mammals. Humans are an exception because we reached 2 billion heart rate by about 40, 45 years old. Shyam, who is an electrophysiologist, is here. So, but it's we reached that 2 billion much earlier. So our heart rate wise, we should have, been done, but so technology is what we have, gotten us beyond that mammal, what do you call it? Upper limit, so to speak. So
Ashraf, can I ask you something?
Yes.
Yeah, as usual, excellent talk. One of the things, thinking about, as we both live in South, there's a lot of racial disparity in obesity and then obesity-related death and so on and so forth, right? And a lot of it is probably habits and eating habits and things like that. But I was wondering how much genetic mechanisms and also like, ghrelin, leptin imbalance and those sort of, impact that,
Sure. Now, one interesting aspect you mentioned is how, the racial disparities, a lot of that is, again, one thing about epigenetics, what that is opening our mind is, we used to think, genetic changes takes thousands upon thousands of generations, but you can have epigenetic changes within few generations. So if you are born to slaves, and their children, so there could definitely be epigenetic changes within their genome. There is also an interesting idea called the salt retention hypothesis, that people who used to pick cottons, they are the grandparents of the blacks in the South. They people who were able to retain salt better survived better because they were working in the it's extreme humidity and heat. So that was good for them, not 2000 years ago, but maybe 150 years ago. So the salt retention makes them more prone to retain salt now, even though they're not picking cotton. So that makes them more prone to develop hypertension and whatnot. So yeah, genetics, epigenetic changes actually can happen within 1 or 2 generations. There is a large study from Sweden looking at this, because Sweden, they kept very good records of what is happening to the population over years. And there was a period of starvation, and people born during that time, how their risk for certain diseases are different from other times. Yeah, so a lot of times, things like even including changes in the ghrelin and the appetite, all those things can change quickly. Yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you, Doctor. I think the question
I have one question. Great presentation. Doctor, does being a vegan or vegetarian, does it make any difference in as far as aging?
I am neither. I do know my daughter is kind of a vegan vegetarian, but I don't know what it is. It's clearly healthier, I think. I think red meat, irrespective of all this religious thing, red meat is not really good for you, especially overcooked red meat. It releases a lot of carcinogens and other things. But between vegan and vegetarian, I think vegan is going a little bit too extreme. I do not know whether that has anything to do with aging myself. I need to look that up.
Okay, thank you.
I have a comment about breakfast, because we used to remember the saying that breakfast is the king of meals, and we always believe that you can't skip breakfast. But then after a while, I saw an article, I think maybe on New York Times or some newspaper, saying that it was a myth created by the breakfast industry. It is not true. You can skip breakfast. But the question about 16 hours of fasting, some people, maybe you can say you can't tolerate the that fasting for more than 16 hours if you're doing that. So you might need some breakfast. So I just want to comment on that one. Second thing is that I recently saw a video by Sadhguru. He was saying that he could just have peanuts and a banana for the whole day. That's enough for him. And what he do was that he take natural peanuts and actually put it in water overnight and then eat it, handful of it, and a banana. That's all what he need for a day. He could survive on that one. He could have all his faculties. He has no problem functioning properly. Not that a very vigorous, healthy exercise or something, but he could function normally. That's what he was saying.
I'm not surprised. In fact, a lot of people, especially the Silicon Valley type, a lot of them skip, the entire weekends and all. And the thing with hunger is it's a very acquired habit. People can get used to different levels of food intake very quickly. Of course, it takes a while, but it is not at all not difficult not to have I mean, but the thing is, this idea that we have to eat by the clock, that is kind of dangerous. There's nothing like, okay, it is 12 o'clock, it is time to eat. You are not even hungry many times. That's a total very unhealthy thing to do.
Jalil, you have some question, right? Or do you want to talk something?
Doctor, you talked about the telomere. Telomere, with each cell division, the length of the telomere gets shorter and shorter. So my question, that's what, one of the factors that creates aging. So my question is there something that we can do to get the telomere longer? I mean, or at least prevent the getting it shorter. That I mean, like eating something, taking some medication or anything.
That's an intense area of research. There is data that shows that exercise could slow telomere shortening, but there is also some serious research looking into that, including in animal models injecting some adenovirus vector that can reverse the telomere shortening. However, telomere shortening is not the whole story. Once upon a time, it used to be considered like the hallmark, but a lot of cells in our body doesn't have to divide. The problem is differentiating and epigenetic silencing is a bigger problem. So telomere shortening, the problem with that is, even though it is feasible, the telomere shortening, if you interfere with that, it can lead to cancer. So that's kind of a fine balance between there. So that's a kind of a tricky area for intervention, even though there are intervention within mouse models.
Thank you. So Anup has another question. What does too much exercise means? Do we have a standard optimum exercise plan?
Yeah, I think that's individualized. You need to know what's your heart rate, and you need to measure at the baseline, and it should go up to, about 20 or 40% more. I mean, you don't want to overdo it, to the point that your heart rate is, twice as your normal rate. So you need to check your baseline heart rate. So it is depending on your individual person's heart rate, and the heart rate actually slows down for people who are, constantly exercising. You tend to develop so-called vagal tone. So, but when you are starting out, you need to be careful, monitor your heart rate. You really don't want to overdo it, and especially when you're starting late, exercise can be dangerous too. Now, the other thing is, with exercise, doesn't necessarily have to be intense stuff. Even simple like walking and all have its own benefit.
Okay, എനിക്കൊരു question ഉണ്ട്. So doctor പറഞ്ഞു 16 hours fasting and 8 hours like food kind of a pattern അല്ലേ? That is a healthy pattern. അല്ലെങ്കിൽ അത് നമുക്ക് നല്ലതാണെന്ന്. So like every day should a person carry that, or like weekly 2-3 ദിവസം അങ്ങനെ ചെയ്താൽ മതിയോ? Is it like day to day, if we are doing that is good, or is there any plan for that?
Whichever works, whichever works. Ideally, on a regular basis, and but this kind of cyclical stress is also considered okay. You can, it's basically stressing yourself a little bit, so just ask yourself, when was last time you felt really hungry? And if you can't remember, that's a bad sign. So yeah, just make sure you have that periods once in a while.
But is there any limitation, like, okay, this age people can do this, or this condition can do this, or something like that?
Very good question. I appreciate you asking that, because see, this is not medical advice to individual people. If you have diabetes and if you are taking insulin, you can't do these things. Okay, just make sure that you talk to your doctor before doing that. I am assuming you're otherwise healthy, no major medical problems. Yeah, so if you have medical issues, you should be always check with your doctor what specific diet plan you can have.
Okay, so
thanks for asking that question. Yeah.
So how about a pregnant lady?
Oh, that's a different, yeah, of course, that is not the time to do fasting. That's a very high metabolic condition. Need calories for 2 people. You do not want to do any of this during pregnancy. You do not want to become overweight. Pregnancy is a high risk state for developing diabetes and blood sugar issues. You want to eat normally, but you do not want to do intermittent fasting and all during pregnancy. No, I wouldn't certainly recommend that.
So, like maybe an age of like, like we feed a lot, right? Our first 6 months, baby feed I don't think there is a gap. Like every 2 hours, 3 hours, feed even the mother's milk or whatever it is.
Yes.
Is that a good thing, or like?
No, definitely don't start intermittent fasting a neonate. No. That is all normal. They have such small stomach capacity, so they don't have the capacity to have a large meal. So for them it is intermittent feeding, not intermittent fasting. That age and all definitely is not something you want to try intermittent fasting. I wouldn't do intermittent fasting before puberty, to be honest.
Okay, thank you. James had no question. James had no should I?
Sure.
Okay. Question is, can you elaborate the comment on a comment you made about the overcooked meat releasing carcinogen?
Yeah. So the red meat, especially if you cook on a grill, and if you overcook, it can actually release certain carcinogens, certain benzenes. They are actual carcinogens. It's more with the red meat, especially cured red meat or treated red meat or like bacon. And that does appear to have increased risk of GI cancers like colon. So that's definitely not a good idea to overcook, especially red meat. And also, when you cook meat and carbohydrate together, it is also not a good idea to overcook. You can have glycosylation of the proteins. The protein itself gets glycosylated, so that glycosylated proteins are not also very good. So yeah, ideally not overcook that kind of combination.
Question about biryani
Not really. I mean, it's not overcooked. I mean, but again, there is a concept of glycosylation of protein. This is not a reason to stop biryani. But again, biryani should not be a staple diet for sure. It is not like the most healthy food. I love biryani though. Okay, but it's.
Like we all love biryani. So the random carbs, meat.
Right. No, I'm not saying don't eat it. Everything in moderation. Yeah, but there are people like my friend from Kerala. He was telling he knows some people who eats biryani every day. I was like, God, that is just awful. That's not healthy.
Where are ചോദ്യങ്ങളുണ്ടോ? This is an interesting conversation. We can talk for long. അതെനിക്ക് തോന്നുന്നുണ്ട് എല്ലാവർക്കും ഒത്തിരി ചോദ്യങ്ങൾ ഉണ്ടാകും. പക്ഷേ സീരിയസ് ആയ ക്വസ്റ്റ്യൻസ് എന്തെങ്കിലും?
ഹലോ ഡോക്ടറെ, ഒരു കാര്യം കൂടി എനിക്ക് ചോദിക്കാനുള്ളത്, പിന്നെ കേൾക്കുന്നുണ്ടോ? ഡോക്ടർ പറഞ്ഞല്ലേ ഇപ്പൊ സലാഡ് നമ്മൾ സോസ് കൂടുതലായിട്ട് കൂട്ടി കഴിക്കുമ്പോൾ സലാഡ്, നോർമൽ സലാഡ് ഓക്കെ. കാരണം നമ്മൾ ഇവിടെയെല്ലാം ഒരു ബൊഫെ നടത്തുമ്പോൾ സലാഡ് ഒരു 15 ടൈപ്പ് ഓഫ് സലാഡ് ഇവിടെ വെക്കുന്നുണ്ട്. അപ്പം യൂറോപ്യൻ കൺട്രി ആളുകൾ വരുമ്പോൾ അവരെടുക്കുന്നത് ഐ ആം ഓൺലി ഈറ്റിംഗ് ദ സലാഡ് എന്ന് പറഞ്ഞിട്ട് അവർ 2 പ്ലേറ്റ് എടുത്തിട്ട് കംപ്ലീറ്റ് 2 പ്ലേറ്റിലും സലാഡ്, മീനിങ് ആപ്പിൾ സലാഡ്, ചിക്കൻ സലാഡ്, പാസ്റ്റ സലാഡ് ആൻഡ് ഫിഷ് സലാഡ്, ലോട്ട് ഓഫ് മാക്രോണി സലാഡ്. അപ്പോൾ ഈ സലാഡ് എല്ലാം ഹൗ ടു മേക്കിംഗ് സലാഡ് വെരി അത്രയും ഈ സലാഡ് ഡ്രസ്സിങ് ചേർത്തിട്ട് ഡിഫറൻസ് ഓഫ് കൈൻഡ് ഓഫ് mustard, sauce, everything mixing. I think that salad is very hard for people, you know.
So that is not the salad I meant. You know, I think that is a misuse of the word salad. You know, salad I just meant, you know, basically only vegetables. Yeah, if you add chicken and, you know, pasta, I mean, then call it salad. Yeah.
What about the Waldorf and apple salad? Sir, there is a apple, you know, apple calorie. There is mayonnaise missing. The eating the cholesterol guys. So very dangerous, right? Or
yeah.
So that guy is saying. That guy is saying, അവർ പറയുന്നു ഞാൻ ഓൺലി സലാഡ്, ഞാൻ സിക്ക് മാൻ ആണ്, പക്ഷെ എടുത്തിട്ടുണ്ട് 2 പ്ലേറ്റ് ഫുൾ സലാഡ് മാത്രം. അപ്പൊ അതൊക്കെ വെരി ബോഡിക്ക് ഡേഞ്ചർ ആയിട്ട് വരും എന്നുള്ളതാണ് എന്റെ ഒരു അല്ലേ.
Sure. That's common sense. Yeah. You know, basically use common sense. Yeah.
അപ്പൊ സലാഡിന്റെ കാര്യം പറഞ്ഞപ്പോ ഞാൻ അതൊന്ന് ക്ലിയർ
I'm so sorry. I didn't even know there are some salads that are like this, the one you have explained. That doesn't even sound like salad. But again, that is not what I meant. Yeah.
Okay. That's all.
ഡോക്ടറെ, ഈ നമ്മൾ ഫാസ്റ്റ് ചെയ്യുമ്പോൾ തലവേദന ഉണ്ടാകുന്നത് ഏതെങ്കിലും ഒരു ബാഡ് സൈൻ ആണോ? ലൈക്ക് സം ഡേയ്സ് ഐ സ്കിപ്പ് മൈ മോർണിംഗ് ബ്രേക്ക്ഫാസ്റ്റ്, സോ ബൈ അറൌണ്ട് 11 o'clock 12 o'clock I get a mild headache. Is it that anything a bad sign of something, or
it's hard to, you know, I'm so sorry, but hard to give medical advice over the phone. But do you have diabetes or something?
No.
Okay. Well, you know, yeah, just that's not. Yeah, that could be because you are skipping also coffee and all. You can definitely have coffee and tea. Don't have to, because most people need a coffee or something to get started. And coffee, as far as we know, is excellent. I mean, there is really a lot of good health benefit to coffee. It's one of those good things that is actually you can like it, and it's actually also good for you.
Yeah, I think with no much sugar and milk.
Yes, that's right.
അവിടെയാണ് പ്രശ്നം വരുന്നത്. നമുക്ക് ഇന്ത്യൻസിന് അത് ഡിഫിക്കൽട്ട്.
Yeah. That's the thing. You know, we make everything kind of a little unhealthy. Yeah.
Doctor, what is your opinion on the 4 white things like sugar, salt, white rice, and what is the next one? Maida or something like that. The white flour. The 4 whites as people.
Yeah. I would add a 5th one, which is sitting. We spend a lot of time sitting. There's a lot of words that are not good for you. Sitting, smoking, salt, sugar. But anyway, so the ones you mentioned, they all have so-called high caloric index. That means you eat it, you get the glucose very quickly. You know, so that is not a good thing. Now, of course, you know, in certain situations, yes, but most people, that sudden increase in sugar will spike your insulin level, and high insulin level in the body is bad for you for multiple reasons. And that's why those things that are very easy to get absorbed are bad for people.
Dr. Ashraf, this is Yahya from Kerala.
Hi, Yahya, how are you?
Your old classmate.
Yeah. Glad to see you.
Nice.
And I love your nice background. Yeah. Got the milky way there.
Maybe because of some issues with light. Yeah. I have a quick question regarding the status of the research on anti-aging, because I read one article in early 90s, appeared in Scientific American. It was in 1992 or 93. So it was all about, that was the cover pic. There was a cover picture, and then it was all about anti-aging research. But now, since your topic is the same, related to this one. I would like to know what is the status of the research in anti-aging all over the world. In that article, I remember they were mentioning something about oxygen reactive species and antioxidants and something like that. Maybe it's almost 30 years old.
Yeah. You know, so that's a good point. About 20 years ago, antioxidants were all the craze. You know, people thought, okay, antioxidants is all you need. Most of the aging is due to oxidative damage to the tissue. But that really has not really panned out. Even though, even now, even after all the negative research, you know, antioxidants are still a $100 billion industry in US alone, I think. However, things have moved on from the antioxidant era. Of course, you know, even things that used to thought to be antioxidants, like fruits or like certain colored vegetables, you know, the colors are some of the, you know, that's a good point to remember. When you buy things that has natural colors, they tend to be the so-called antioxidant, but the way they work is through hormesis. Most of the things that colors work through hormesis nowadays. Now we don't think antioxidant has a big role in aging right now. Even though if you look at supplements, you know, a lot of supplements are still being sold on that. So right now that is not considered like the primary thing you want to do for anti-aging. Thankfully, the research has gotten so much in the last 10-20 years, you know, partly because a lot of Silicon Valley types have gotten into this. Actually, Alphabet, which is the parent company of Google, has a sub company called Calico, which is a California life extension something, but it is primarily focused on life extension. And they're, you know, they and many others are pouring billions on aging research. So a lot more things are going to come in the next several years or decades.
As you mentioned, due to the, you know, computational biology or computational chemistry, modeling and other things, drug designing. That
right.
will be adding.
Yes, exactly. So from the science to the drug, you know, the interval has decreased in every field, in cancer, of course, in my field, but also in these fields. You know, you identify a molecule. So the advantage of what is happening now is we have better understanding of what is aging, and once we understand the problem, you know, we have better way to tackle it. So it's a very exciting field.
One more quick question regarding something. It's not exactly related to this topic, but is there any material model system which can mimic the life in your knowledge? Any material model system? Because I feel that we can better understand the life and life processes if we have a model system.
Yeah, great question. As far as I know, not totally, you know, material, but you know, the Craig Venter has created an artificial organism based on, you know, existing models. C. elegans is probably the most well studied, but that's not a, you know, that's a natural thing. But there are some small microorganisms that are kind of artificially made by the Craig Venter's team.
Okay. What is his name?
Craig Venter, V-E-N-T-E-R. Craig Venter. Yeah. He was part of the Genome Project. He's like a famous scientist here. Yeah. So he was developing kind of boutique organisms for specific purpose. For example, like you can develop a bacteria to clean up the gulf of the petrol or the diesel leak, so to speak. So there was, you know, some interest, and then he has released at least one organism that was kind of made up, that has never been in the nature. It's never existed in nature, so it was made by his lab.
Okay. Thank you, Ashraf.
Thank you for the question. ഒരു ചെറിയ അനൗൺസ്മെന്റ് ഉണ്ട്. നാളെ രാവിലെ 10 മണി ഷിക്കാഗോ ടൈം, രാത്രി 9:30 ഇന്ത്യ ടൈമില് ഒരു പ്രസന്റേഷൻ ഉണ്ട്. ഡോക്ടർ ശ്യാമാണ് ചെയ്യുന്നത്. കോവിഡ് വാക്സിനെ കുറിച്ചാണ്. സോ ഇഫ് എനിവൺ വോണ്ട് ടു ജോയിൻ, സെയിം ലിങ്ക് ആണ്, സെയിം മീറ്റിംഗ് ആണ്. പ്ലീസ് അറ്റൻഡ്. നിങ്ങൾക്ക് ചോദ്യങ്ങൾ ചോദിക്കാം. ഐ ഹോപ്പ് ഡോക്ടർ ശ്യാം ഇസ് സ്റ്റിൽ ദെയർ. മീറ്റിംഗ് അറ്റൻഡ് ചെയ്തിട്ടുണ്ടെന്നാണ് വിശ്വസിക്കുന്നത്. സോ അതൊരു ചെറിയൊരു അനൗൺസ്മെന്റ് ആണ്. And anyone have any other questions? ആർക്കെങ്കിലും ചോദ്യങ്ങളുണ്ടോ? It is like long. ഒത്തിരി സമയം എടുത്തു ഡോക്ടറിന്റെ. പക്ഷേ last maybe 1 or 2 questions. Okay. ഇല്ലെന്നാ തോന്നുന്നേ.
Bye all. Happy holidays.
Okay, thank you, doctor. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot. Happy holidays. Nice meeting.
See you again.
Very
Another
informative.
topic.
Thank you.